Welcome back to part 2 of our overview of the NGO proposal outline and what you should be putting in the detailed outline that's due in week 7. I got cut off a little bit right at the end of the part 1 video, so I'll pick up right where I left off. We were talking down here about NGO names and acronyms and the importance of creating a name that might have an acronym that goes with it, like cause or free, or I can think of a whole bunch of others. READ is one that's popular in education circles, and it can the R, the E, the A, and the D can all stand for something. So think about what your name would be. Make it something that makes sense and points towards what your aim or mission is. Speaking of aim or mission, that's the next section of the introduction that I'd like for you to outline. And this is where you identify whether you're doing an operational or an advocacy NGO. So think about it with your group. Think about whether or not the purposes of your NGO are to implement a program or a project that addresses a specific need or community, and that would be operational, or if the goal is to advocate for some broader change or has a broader cause that the NGO would be supporting. Obviously, all of it needs to be related to education, and it needs to be comparative, international, or comparative and international in some way. For the rest of these sections, and I'll go through this much more quickly, this is where you really start outlining what the NGO is going to be doing. So a vision statement. I would love for you to have a draft vision statement. You ask, what is a vision statement? Well, remember those two documents that you could access from the syllabus. This is the syllabus section on NGO development proposal, establishing and running an advocacy NGO handbook, and then the NGO handbook. Let's go to the NGO handbook first, and if you open it up, and I'm just going to scroll down to the table of contents, you'll see that there's a section here on values, vision, and mission. Then there's a section on planning, evaluating, and managing, and you can go on and on and on. So the first thing that we're talking about is a vision, right? It's the vision, and then the mission. So if we took a look at this, that would all be covered in Chapter 2, which starts on page 14. So if I scroll down to roughly page 14, I'll just get down there this way. Then we have Chapter 2 here on values, vision, and mission. And when you read through this chapter, and again, or you could skim through this chapter, it will have a section that will specifically relate to visions. So it gives you an example for an activity to create a vision statement. You could do this with your NGO team. You would be like the board, staff, or key volunteers, and you would be your own small group. And then you could do this activity as part of your development of it. Or you could do it in many different ways, however it works best for you. But remember that a vision statement describes how you want the world to be. And what I'm trying to say is that you can use these two documents as references for your team as you work through your outline to make it more detailed and to include some of the stuff that you want to say. Also, if you look on the other document, the Establishing and Running an Advocacy NGO, starting on page 24 is a whole section about your vision for the future. And it will say what a vision is. An organization's vision is its view of how it would like the world to be. That's very similar to what the other document says. Then it says what a mission is. A statement of organizational mission describes the organization's purpose for existing, given its vision of the reality to be. And then it will give you some examples. In either document, you will get examples of what those look like. So, for example, I went back to the NGO handbook, and it gives you an example of a vision statement from an actual NGO called Young Women Unite. And so you can see what that looks like. So use these documents that you have accessible through the syllabus here to start looking through or thinking about what the different sections of your NGO are. And then I'd like for you to think carefully about what your proposed functions of the NGO will be, and try to keep this as focused as possible. You're not going to solve all of the world's problems with one NGO. I wish it was different, but it's not. So what is your NGO specifically going to do in order to address the mission and vision that you outlined? And then think about assessment of the situation. What will you have to do in order to figure out what are the new problems out there? What ways have old problems changed? This is when you do, the familiar lit review or review of the research or examination of what the problem is and what's the documentation for that problem. You want to look at what's new and what's old. In here it talks about external threats and opportunities versus internal strengths and weaknesses. This is very similar to a SWOT analysis for an NGO that you haven't actually created yet. For those of you who are unfamiliar with SWOT, it's SWOT, and it stands for Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats. If you Google a SWOT analysis, SWOT analysis, in fact, I'll do that real quickly here. SWOT analysis. You will find so much. And it will help you maybe think about how you could address those sections right there. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Anyway, you can look through and see which of these resources is most helpful for you in terms of thinking about what might be the challenges, where's the resistance, what's the, where are the things that are out in the real world that might prevent your NGO from becoming established, being funded, implementing whatever it is going to be implementing. And then opportunities, you want to look at those in terms of who might you partner with. What are some of the demonstrated needs that are already being addressed that relate to what you're doing? What kind of funding might already be available, right? And then when it says internal strengths and weaknesses, you have to think about into the future, what will your NGO look like? And what will be the strengths that make it up? Or what might be the potential weaknesses that make it up? So, for example, if I were to create an NGO that was predominantly comprised of, other professors and grad students, one of the strengths is that we'd have a very strong research base. We'd be very much a scholarly organization because we would understand the elements of research. But that also means that we have a little bit of a weakness because oftentimes academics are somehow separated or distinct from the real world. And I'm using air quotes even though you can't see me. So I haven't been a classroom teacher for a long time. So I haven't lived in that world. And therefore I might have a great sympathy and a great respect for what classroom teachers do, but I don't really understand the day-to-day challenges that exist this year in these contexts. You see what I'm saying? So we might think about what are the strengths and weaknesses based on the personnel that we'll have, or based on the context that we're operating in, or the geographic location, or the the kinds of potential activities that we'll be doing. So think about that. And then what is the possible future for your proposed NGO? In other words, where could it go and how could it become sustainable? So sustainability is going to always be a very big thing for us to consider in comparative and international education, broadly speaking, but certainly when we're talking about education for development. Sustainability predominantly means that you have people, real stakeholders for the targeted population that your NGO is meant to serve, who are driving the organization. They are making the decisions. They are creating the opportunities. How do you put that sustainability into your NGO? You want to then move on to think about what are some possible alternative strategies to address the situation. This might be where you more specifically review what other organizations are already doing to address the problem or the issue that your NGO will be tackling, and thinking about what is working and what isn't working from those other examples. Then final choice of strategies will be in thinking about what the proposed functions are, what the assessment of the situation looks like, and what other organizations are doing. What will be the strategy for your NGO moving forward? Think about it in this way. Think about it in terms of strategic phases. What will you need to do first? What will you need to do second? And what will you need to do third? And I would think of those as sort of broad sections for the NGO, first, second, and third. The first phase is the startup phase. What will you need to do to start your organization, your NGO, on the right foot, to get it embedded in the community, to get the resources that are necessary, to get any of the training, etc., in place? This usually has a lot to do with infrastructure, that is financial, personnel, or other kinds of resources, and capacity, that's knowledge and skills. So what kinds of infrastructure can you already use or adopt in the first phase in order to start up? What additional resources might you need? What capacity, or I should say, what knowledge or skill training would be needed to bring the staff of your NGO up to speed, or to bring the volunteers and community members from the target population into the fold and into the organization? And then how would you then move on to phase 2, which would be the sort of establishment of the NGO, meaning that you're beyond startup and now you're becoming, I'll just use an academic word here, you're becoming normed. In other words, you're thinking about what are the regular activities that we provide, and what is our systematic approach to the activities or the functions of the NGO. And then the final phase, the third phase, is truly achieving some sort of sustainability. If those of you who are part of this team, who are the founders of the NGO, were to, for whatever reason, have to abandon the NGO after it was already in phase 2, how would you be ensured, or how would you know that the NGO would still continue to grow and to adapt and to move forward to address the issue that it was created to address? Then you want to think about a development and implementation plan. This will be taking those 3 phases and thinking very specifically about what will go into each of those. Now, for your detailed outline, I'm not expecting this to be crazy detailed. I'm expecting it to maybe go another level down into each of the 3 phases: your startup, your establishment, and your sustainability phase. Maybe another level to say, all right, what are the components of startup? What are the components of establishment? What are the components of sustainability? Then you want to think about a monitoring and evaluation plan. It's hard to have an NGO if you don't know how it's doing. How do you monitor and evaluate? There, again, will be sections in both the NGO handbook and in the advocacy document about NGOs that will give you more information about that and what you should be doing to think about monitoring and evaluation. And then, of course, you want to brainstorm some potential funding sources and always have references. So these are the things that are going to go into your detailed outline for week 7. Just remember that it's a detailed outline. It's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to give me an opportunity to provide you feedback and direction, so that when you move towards your final version, you have already thought through what some of the components are. You've already gotten feedback from me as your sort of consultant on this development project, and you can make changes from the outline phase until the final assignment phase much more readily than you can if you're scrambling to get all this sort of brainstormed and outlined at the last minute. Okay, looking forward to seeing these detailed outlines, and of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me.